second session of today's program under the title Differentiating the Eisenman. Our opening speaker will be Mr. Gabriele Mastrigli. Our other participants are Manuel Orazi, John Morrow, Mrs. Cynthia Davidson, and Mr. Kim Förster. I will now read you short biographies. Mr. Gabriele Mastrigli is an architect and critic. He studied at the University of Rome, La Sapienza, and at the RWTH Aachen, Germany. He investigates the relationship between architects designing and writing, researching publishing as a critical form of architecture, the main subject of his PhD dissertation. He teaches theory and design at the University of Camerino and architecture theory at Cornell University. From 2000 to 2008, he has been a consultant to the Italian Ministry of Culture's Department of Contemporary Art and Architecture. He is a contributor to the national daily Il Manifesto. His articles and essays appeared in many magazines, including Domus, Log, and Lotus International. He has published Junk Space, a critical analogy of Rem Koolhaas's recent writings in Italian and French. In 2007, he was the curator of the exhibition Holland, Italy, 10 Works of Architecture, hosted by Maxi in Rome. In 2008, he was among the curators of the Italian pavilion at the 11th Venice Biennale. In 2009-10, together with Mr. Aureli and Tara, he has led the Studio Rome centers elsewhere at the Verlaag Institute, Rotterdam. Please also welcome to Cynthia Davidson. She is the founder and editor of Log, Observations on Architecture and Contemporary City, a triannual journal published by the Annual Comparison in New York City. Also, the founding director of the Annual Project. She was editor of the architecture tabloid Annie from 1993 to 2000, and editor of the 10 Annie books, which documented the 10 international Annie architecture conferences on the understandability of architecture at the end of the millennium. Prior to the Annie project, she edited Inland Architecture, a regional magazine based in Chicago. In addition to editing Log, Ms. Davidson is also editor of the Writing Architecture series book, which emphasizes architectural theory, published with MIT Press. A former lab fellow in advanced environmental studies at the Harvard Graduate School of Design, she studied journalism and art history as undergraduate of Ohio Wesleyan. Also with us today is Mr. Manuel Orazi. In 2007, he got a PhD in History of Architecture and of Cities of Foundation on the Advanced Studies in Venice, with the dissertation, The Erratic Universe of Jono Friedman, tutor Marco De Michelis. He has studied in Tel Aviv, in Israel, in 2004, and in Paris several times between 2004 and 2006. Since 2002, he works for the publishing house Quadibelt, based in Macerata, where he edits the architecture books. Since 2011, he collaborates with FISTARCH, International Festival of Architecture in Perugia. Between February and March 2010, he studied the Jono Friedman archives in Getty Research Institute of Los Angeles, California. He regularly writes for the magazines Log and Abitare. Among his recent essays, there are those published in Italian editions of Learning from Las Vegas, in AAV Ugo La Pietra Abité la Ville, Orléans, and in Jona Friedman, Architecture with People, by the People, for the People. Also, John McMorrough is with us today. He is principal architect in the firm studio APT, Architectural Project Theory, and an associate professor of the University of Michigan Taubman College of Architecture and Urban Planning. As an architect, John has been working for design offices in Kansas City, New York, Boston, and Rotterdam, and has taught theory and design at the Yale School of Architecture, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, the Ohio State University, the Institute of Architecture at the University of Applied Arts in Vienna, and University of Illinois at Chicago. He received a Bachelor of Architecture from Kansas, a Master of Architecture with distinction from the Harvard Graduate School of Design, and a PhD in Architecture from Harvard University, where his doctoral research was on the prehistory of postmodernism. His research to date has taken three forms: genealogies of contemporary architecture by way of investigations into terms of its development, the theoretization of current design practices and formats of extra architectural production, and program building in schools of architecture. His current work focuses on articulating the modalities of world making at work in contemporary forms of design narrative, architecture, film, fictions, and games. Last but not least, Mr. Gim Förster is a writer, researcher, and teacher holding a doctorate in architecture from ETH Zurich, Switzerland. The doctoral thesis focused on institutional and intellectual history of the New York Institute of Architecture and Urban Studies from 1967 to 1985, which was directed by Peter Eisenman. Förster has studied English and American Studies, Geography and Pedagogy in Münster, Berlin, and Toronto. From 2006 to 2009, he was employed at the Institute of History and Theory of Architecture at the ETH Zurich, where he presently holds a position as a lecturer in a doctoral program. Previously, he was visiting researcher at the CCA in Montreal and at Columbia University, New York. Förster has published in various magazines and other contexts. From 2002 to 2007, he has been part of the editorial team of the Berlin-based journal En Architectur. Recently, he collaborated with the New York-based group Common Room in the publication Arts for Living. Förster's history of the Institute of Architecture and Urban Studies will be published by GTA Publishers, ETH Zurich in 2015 with a grant from the Graham Foundation. Please join me in welcoming our dear guests, and we can start with the first presentation. Please, Gabriele.
Let's play the Mario Carpo game.
Yeah, the Mario Carpo game is
a good game.
It's a very good game.
It's a very good game.
I'm an admirer of Mario. I would have to learn a lot from him. Actually, I think that this is, as far as I understood, the most difficult session, exactly because it deals with something that at the same time seems to incorporate everything we have already talked and we are going to talk about, and but in a way trying to decompose it, to dismantling it, to differentiating in the sense of putting into light different aspects of Eisenman's career. And this is what actually I was asked to do that. At the same time, I realized that in order to talk about Eisenman in terms of theory, practice, intellectual speculation, construction, philosophy, history, or whatever, we have to inevitably turn back to the fact that Eisenman is an architect. It's simply an architect from many points of view. And this is an important starting point because it avoids to keep a strange path while looking at especially specific aspect of his approach. For sure, as an architect, I think Peter Eisenman has been, first of all, a voyager into architecture, a navigator. And this has to do with the approach, I think, he learned since the beginning. And we talk a lot about Colin Rowe influence, and the fact that this produced an approach that is inevitably analytic. We're learning to look at things means to learn how to reveal differences in things, and architectural artifacts, of course, first of all. And this analytical approach has been, of course, the basis of its starting moment. But at the same time, these differences must be activated in order to produce actions, to be effective. And this is, of course, the story, especially of the first projects. I think that this is an important aspect, to note and to observe that differences are operative in architecture only if they produce a project, if they generate a project. I think that the first project, in effect, is the Terrani project, that started during the PhD thesis and was carried on through many projects of the houses and finally took the form of a book. But I think that this condition of operability of the differences is not something we have to take for granted. It's not something that is automatic. And I think that this is crucial in Eisenman careers and has very much to do with the role of Piranesi. Manuel already put some, for me, important, located at least the role of Piranesi in the one of having, of the importance of having a project. What kind of project is that exactly? And this is what I'm trying to talk to you about. And I think that Piranesi, and especially the Campo Marzio, is the project that is about differences that become operable in terms of space and time. And so the project, Piranesian project, is about, this is important for a specific moment in Eisenman's career, is a project that deals at the same time with space and times and try to let architecture react with these two terms. And the place in which to verify this kind of relationship between space and time is the city. In fact, architecture, the project of the Campo Marzio is basically the project of the city of Rome. So the city, in a way, is the place in which to verify what architecture really produces. And in fact, actually, the Campo Marzio was basically a reaction that Piranesi had, in a way, against another project, so to say, very important at the time. That was a project by Giambattista Nolli. He was, by the way, not an architect in the pure sense of the word. It was more a delineator, was a topographer in a way. Yet the project of the Nolli map was not a simple survey of the city, as it, of course, is the main interpretation of that, but was really something that ended up in represented the idea of the Western city of the last 20, 50 years. That is, the city as a ground, rational, measurable, thus exploitable. And this is something that, of course, is very clear in the central part of the city of Rome, of the Campo Marzio, the famous use of the poché and the relationship between the dark part and the white one. But this is something that is not simply about the historical city. And I think that Peter called this the icon of reaction, no? That was very much used by the Pomo's architects, especially in the late 70s. But I think that this is also the reference for not only the historical city, but also of the informal city right now. We understand actually the nature of urban space, even in the wider spectrum of possibilities. Like, for instance, this one, it's a map of the central Germany, the region of the Ruhr, as something that we can interpret, we can understand, we can use, we can even project, you know, in the same terms of the Nolli map, as a use of poché, as a definition of grounds that are clearly measured, thus condition of exploitation of the place, in which, of course, architecture is something that is not even necessary, you know, to that. I think that Piranesi was against that, and this was also because Piranesi was part of the project of Nolli. He was hired by Nolli to delineate part of the Nolli map, and especially the little Nolli map that was a little version of the bigger one that was especially delineated by Piranesi. So Piranesi was working, was very aware of what Nolli was doing. And at the same moment, actually, almost same years, he started a reflection about what Rome was and what Rome could be, in a way, by proposing this sort of hypothetical reconstruction of the ancient Rome that was very much, in reality, related to the present Rome, and, in a way, with an effort of projecting the present situation into a possible future. And that was the Iconographia, the famous, the project was made by many parts, actually, was concluded by the famous plan that you, of course, know very well. But the critique, actually, that Piranesi made to Nolli is, in a way, the absence of a project, because the Nolli map had, in a way, a project that do not incorporate, you know, a specific role for architecture. In a way, architecture played a very unstable role in that respect. And that, for Piranesi, was not acceptable, of course, because in the DNA of Roman culture, architecture had always played an important role, and especially in the very ancient times. So I think that these discourses become important in a specific moment, you know, in Eisenman careers. So that is in the 70s. You know? It is, in fact, at the end of the 70s that Eisenman, thanks to Tafuri, of course, Eisenman, like all of us, knew already about Piranesi, but it's, of course, it's Tafuri that provided a very interesting approach, you know, to Piranesi's work. And I think, if I'm not right, the moment you met him was in 1974, when he was invited in Princeton for the lecture, for the first lecture he did in the US, that generated, of course, a very fertile collaboration with the Institute of Urban Studies. And the lecture was the L'architecture dans les boudoirs, whereas the lecture in which Tafuri was elaborating a reflection about the very last moment of the avant-garde history. What is actually Tafuri thinking on Piranesi. These two issues of domus happen to be really related to this discourse about Piranesi. And actually, the Italian architecture historian had, since the end of the 60s, started to put the history of modern architecture under the light of a deep critique of its ideology. And Piranesi's project becomes the starting point, to understand the role of the avant-garde, to which Eisenman, of course, according to Tafuri, belonged, as the prophecy and at the same time at the realization of the crisis of the ideal of totality and universality in modern society. In that respect, the Campo Marzio is depicted by Tafuri as a gigantic, useless machine that put on stage a struggle between architecture and the city, however, a struggle with no winner, destined to reveal the internal structural contradiction of the Enlightenment dialectic and the inevitable negative dimension of the project as utopia of dissolved form. So basically, Tafuri's approach to Piranesi that finally ended up in a book called The Sphere and the Labyrinth, that was the collection of all the essays produced during the 70s, starts with the reflection on Piranesi, and coming back especially to two aspects of Piranesi's work. One was Piranesi of the famous prisons, the carceri, who is the starting moment in Piranesi's work once we got in Rome, and in which the crisis is eminent, is a crisis of the subject. This is literally represented in the prison, in the typology itself of the space that is invented, by the way, by Piranesi, because these are spaces completely invented and not in which you see how the figures are treated like aliens, entrapped into this world, into this mechanical world that is not representable anymore. Perspective failed to delineate exactly what the space is. And Piranesi and Tafuri's analysis are about that, about showing how the pictures looks effective, looks like possible spaces, yet they are not. They are impossible tridimensional spaces. But Tafuri goes all beyond that, showing that the problem of Piranesi's and at the same time the success of Piranesi, the importance, is to put into question representation. Exactly that thing that started with Alberti. So in a way, the story from Alberti to Piranesi is the story of architecture as the possibility of a clear representation of its means. That is space, actually, three-dimensional space. And Tafuri introduced a guy that was very important for him, that is Eisenstein, the director that was totally fond of Piranesi. He was, and in The Sphere and the Labyrinth, he publishes a piece of Eisenstein that tells the story of this small print, a small etching. That is one of the carceri, actually not part of the carceri series, but I mean, that's not important. Hence, he had this picture hang on the wall of his house and was totally obsessed by that, and saying that this picture talked very much about the possibility of a cinematic space. The picture is not about a static space, but it's about the spaces that's going to move. And the hypothesis that Eisenstein made and Tafuri put in the book is that we can in a way, analyzing and then deconstruct the pieces of that work of art and giving them the role of acquiring a sort of internal movement that produce a series of action that at the end would produce a different form of the space itself. In other words, with Eisenstein, the critique of the work of art becomes action on the work of art itself. It's not just about seeing things, it's about moving, transforming things. This is the problem for Tafuri, and therefore this is why avant-garde can be idolized as a sort of pure world in which everything works simply composed in a different way. You know, avant-garde is about what Tafuri calls the end of the language, no? as a possibility of saying things that are stable. In fact, actually, in the avant-garde, the interesting thing is that the Italian version of the Sphere of the Labyrinth do not have Piranesi on the cover, like the American one, but has one of the collage. Yeah, Raoul Hausmann. It's something that tells very much more about the end of the story and not simply of the beginning of the story of the avant-garde. That is, in montage, the differences are exorcised by exalting them, by celebrating them. You know? Still, the problem, this is a technique of representation of something that is destined to fail. You know? Is the problem of the technique of the shock. You know? It tells us that something is going to collapse, but then we don't know how to escape from that dead end. And I think that's, in fact, the solution, so to say, brackets, that Tafuri proposes is in the inevitable solitude of the architect, of the artist, once is confronted with this problem. And in fact, one of the passages of the Sphere of the Labyrinth is about talking about another city that comes in those years as a project. It was the proposal by Aldo Rossi of the analogous city, 1976, in which the city, as you can see, is just and it can just rely on the solitude of a subjective memory, no? And it's a completely autobiographical approach that, in a way, fails the possibility of talking about any collective or more general issue. I think that, to me, now this this is some critical aspect, because for sure it produced an enormous problem in the Italian architecture period, you know, because everyone seemed, and that was very much about the whole guys of the Venice school that from that moment on perceived themselves in a way in a sort of dead end. But I think that Piranesi's project is not simply that. It's something in a way different, and that was I'm trying to explain you now. In fact, actually, the condition of the figure-figure system that the iconographia implies is not something that is completely detached from a, let's say, support. Like the collage, of many of the collage of the avant-garde were. And in fact, if we go through the whole preparation of this, this work, we notice that Piranesi is very clear in demonstrating how to arrive to the final configuration of this city. And it's very much about some operations that has to do with the history of the city, but also with the physical consistency of the city. First of all, there is this so-called scenografia that comes before. In the whole project was a book, first of all. It was not just plates, it was a book. And before the iconografia comes the scenografia that shows that the starting point was to take the existing Rome as it was, remove all the modern part, reveal the ruins, and start from the ruins, the existing ruins, a reflection about how to, let's say, fill the blanks, to complete the missing part by using information that at the time were accessible through different means, of course. But there is another even more, and I mean, it's already clear that there is a moment in which Piranesi deals with a sort of tabula rasa that inevitably implies that there is a ground in which to operate. And this is even more clear when we go in the previous plates, and especially to the topographia. In the topographia, the topography is something that it's important to Piranesi, not simply to determine what were the physical three-dimensional conditions of the ground, because of course we know that we are talking about a non-existent ground. No? It's a fictional ground, of course. And plus, this ground is not just about the ground. So the earth is a ground that implies information, indexes, I would say, about other features of the city, the monuments, some piece of infrastructures, some elements of the city, places that are named as relevant, and everything is put together. And you see that the kind of notation that Piranesi uses by putting just letters and saying it's not important to have the real form in some cases of the monument. Yeah, you just put a letter and then there is an index that refers to the letters. And this is a process that went on using the different topographies. There are other two that are really interesting to me. For instance, the one on the left, that's the Topographia Vestigiorum Veteris Urbis. So a topography of the ancient buildings that are not represented in their forms, but just represented in the fact of being there. So named with figures, and there is a list of that, and these are basically what creates a sort of indexical map of the city. That's very much actually new. I've never seen a map of Rome, treated in this very conceptual way. And then you see in the other picture how that condition starts to be in a way generates the process of producing the forms of the buildings. At the same time are buildings existing, buildings that are invented, the buildings that in a way are reconstructed using the knowledge, the archaeological knowledge that were the case. In a way, how could you call that? I do not know exactly. I was trying to figure out what does it mean, but it's for sure something that includes traces as a result of specific operations on the ground, because the ground is the basic precondition for all this operation, in a sort of, let's say, projective archaeology. I don't know if it's the right word. I mean, we can talk about that. Still, that demonstrates that the invention of the iconografia is not simply about putting new new Roman buildings, one on top of the other, one close to the other, in order to fill the entire area of the Campo Marzio. I think that this has very much to do with with the work that Eisenman started in 1976 while attending at this big workshop, let's say, for which he produced the Cannaregio. Well, in a way, the Cannaregio, exactly like the project of Piranesi, try to keep at the same time together space and time, and reconnecting what Jörg was telling yesterday about the role of the index, and the real and the imaginary, no? In which is not a matter of the past in terms of what has exactly existed, no? Is a past as a projection of ourselves toward the past that inevitably includes also what exists only in a virtual dimension like Le Corbusier hospital. But more, this is something that's it's inevitably related to a topographic investigation. Let's say that the potential of the project is exactly about using a pre-existing architecture medium, in that case the house 10, when applied to a specific space, time, and time condition that is varies as a real and imaginary place. I think here the ground becomes the fundamental condition of operability of the project, you know, exactly. And this is something that Piranesi was not really using in that specific moment, you know, for that specific project, but was something that belonged to the whole career of Piranesi's work. In fact, actually, even the work he did for the Antichità Romane, who was a big survey about all the buildings, all the artifacts of Roman antiquities, is about that. This is, let's say, the first plate in which you see Rome is treated at the same time as a very basic condition, ground condition, no? the ground and its articulation, and evocating what the ancient Rome used to be, no? By putting all the pieces of the famous Forma Urbis, was the only exact information that at the time was accessible for knowing, I mean, how buildings that were demolished and destroyed looked like. What is important, I think, in this context, that Rome again is represented as basically as a ground condition. And I think that some of the projects of that period, beginning of the 80s, are very much interesting to me because they were really deliberately trying to keep time and space together, using the ground as a medium in a way, you know, as a bridge, you know, between the two. And this is the project of Romeo and Juliet for Verona. And the same thing, I mean, we have not time to go deep into the project, but the same La Villette to me works more or less in the same way. There is another aspect, actually, that is interesting in Piranesi's that has to do with the other step, you know? In the sense when the investigation of the properties of this operative field, let's say, move from the city as a whole to the artifacts, you know? And for instance, one of the interesting things that Piranesi showed is this tomb by a family along the Via Appia, in which the the form of the building is the product of time, in physical terms, in the sense that many of those tombs were basically excavated in order to steal material, and then the final result is something that's that was the part is consumed, so to say. So it's something that has to do, in a way, with the effect of this operation of excavation in the artifact through time, and I think that the project, in a way, in Galicia, the city of culture starts to become something that's not anymore a city, in a way, and is not even of course the aspects are the ones of a big intervention, urban intervention. Still, it's more in the realm of the artifact. And finally arriving to the last project, and it's something that has to do very much with the basics. And Piranesi was also very interested in this research, in trying to arrive to the basic principles of this logic, and that, according to him, had very much to do with some aspect of, for instance, of the simple ground of the streets of Rome, or the walls. No? He spent a lot of effort in drawing things that are very basic, no? Just paving of the Via Appia like this one, or piece of walls. And I think that this is, to me, in a way, the moment in which the Berlin memorial, in which in the Eisenman career, the ground becomes something that do not generate anything but itself. No, it just basically, the ground is the ground, and that's all. The ground as a sort of field of possibility, no, without any function, any representation, any duty. Still, no, something can happen there. So the question to me is exactly that. You know, I'm really thought a lot about the sense of this project. I feel, according to my, personal view, the most important for Peter's career is what's the role of this project? No? What not only what we can learn, but what we can do with that. No? What we can. I think that it is something that has to do, of course, with the refuses of any iconography of memory, and with the possibility of memory to emerge, no, in a different way as an individual experience, with the sort of estrangement induced by that space on the person who passed through it. But I'm asking myself, and maybe this is a question that I pose to Peter, you know, if this project is not announcing, you know, another step, you know, in a step that has to do with, in a way, the arrival of a new subject, you know, in his projects. That's subjects that, in a way, has to do with the necessity of not only looking at things, not only analyzing things, not only reading or not being able to read it, but to experience it. We have talked a lot about, and I'm of course not in that field. I'm not with the enemies. I'm not with the phenomenologists. Still, I'm asking myself what's to me so relevant in this project that has to do with the experience of space. And that's all. sorry for being too late.